Module 2, Change and the Individual. In this module, we will look at learning preferences, learning new skills, models of individual change, learning preferences. Effective change managers are not expected to be specialists in training, learning, and development. In many cases, they will be able to work alongside such specialist colleagues, drawing on their expertise, experience, and resources. However, the close connection between change and learning means that change managers do benefit greatly from a good working knowledge of learning theory, skills development, training planning, and coaching. This enables them personally to address such issues when necessary, and to make the most effective use of specialist colleagues when they are available. Change and learning are very closely linked. Knowledge of learning theory, skills development, training planning, and coaching is beneficial. We must address these issues when necessary. Make effective use of specialist colleagues. Create and facilitate an engaging learning environment. Training and learning are terms that are often used quite interchangeably. When we speak of training, it focuses attention on the activity of the trainer, who is responsible for delivering training to the trainee. Learning, on the other hand, approaches the issue from the other side. It focuses on the activity of the learner, who is no longer a passive trainee, but an active participant in the learning process. The role of the former trainer is now to create and facilitate an environment in which the learner engages effectively with what needs to be learned. Of course, in most real situations, elements of both these paradigms operate together. Learning and the individual learner. All personal change involves unlearning old ways of behaving and learning new ones. As a result, it is helpful to have a way of looking at the learning process and how different people like to learn. Kolb described a cyclical process of adult learning, and Honey and Mumford observed different learning styles. 1. Concrete experience. Someone with a preference for this stage is described as an activist. Typically, someone who learns most happily from experience, preferably new experiences involving other people. True activists are constantly busy, enjoying the challenge of anything new, and always ready to have a go. The risk for activists is that their tendency to move on rapidly from one experience to another may mean that they fail to learn effectively. 2. Reflective observation. Someone with a preference for this stage is described as a reflector. Typically, someone who likes to learn from watching others, and from thinking back over their own experiences. Thorough and careful in character, reflectors absorb and consider all possible angles, before drawing conclusions. Reflectors lose opportunities to learn because they tend to take too few risks to gain many practical experiences, and may not engage sufficiently with others. 3. Abstract conceptualization. Someone with a preference for this stage is described as a theorist. Typically, someone who prefers learning that proceeds logically from first principles and appreciate clear theoretical models. They are happy to absorb their ideas through reading. They appreciate lectures, which offer credible explanation of sound theory, or which systematize and integrate data from experience. They may miss learning opportunities due to their aversion to intuitions and creativity, and their intolerance of ambiguity. 4. Practical experimentation. Someone with a preference for this stage is described as a pragmatist. Typically, someone who likes to test and apply ideas and theories, especially where they have practical relevance to a current problem. Their realistic and practical approach to problems makes pragmatists open to new techniques and to anyone who can help or coach them as they try them out. Pragmatists lose learning opportunities by rejecting or ignoring ideas for which they can see no obvious and immediate application. Examples of preferences of different learners. Activists. On-job learning by trial and error. Coaching from a respected practitioner. Activity-based learning in groups. Well-simulated work environments. Reflectors. Observing others live or on video. Action learning sets. Making notes and keeping learning diary. Well-simulated work environments. Pragmatists. practical workshops. On-job learning by trial and error. Applying tools and models to practice situations. Well-simulated work environments. Theorists. Courses and seminars. Lectures and presentations. Reading and personal research. Well-simulated work environments. Please note that none of these examples is uniquely preferred by a single learning style. Pragmatists can learn well from observing others, theorists can learn from coaching, and so on. The fact that a learning method is less preferred does not necessarily mean it will be less effective. The examples illustrate some of the range of options which may support a learning journey, and the learning styles most likely to appreciate each learning method. Learning new skills. The Conscious Competence Learning Model. This diagram, redrawn from the version in the book to help explain the model, shows the stages a learner goes through when learning a new skill. In a change situation, the process can begin with unconscious incompetence in the old business-as-usual world. Learners are precipitated into conscious incompetence as a result of the change. Through training, the learner achieves conscious competence, and through continued practice moves to achieve unconscious competence once again. The learning process has implications for job performance too. The skilled performance or mastery associated with unconscious competence is fluent and quick. Errors are infrequent. As soon as the learner has to pay conscious attention to the skill, and especially before basic competence is achieved, productivity declines and error rates climb. There is a significant fall, or learning dip, in job performance. When planning any change which will involve people in learning new skills where they have previously been highly competent, a learning dip such as this must be expected and planned for. The extent of the dip and the speed with which recovery takes place will be a function of the timeliness and effectiveness of training provision. Key principles of learning. An early stage of this process is to identify groupings of knowledge, skills, and attitudes that can or should be learned together. It is a key principle of learning that things should be learnt the way they will be used. This means that the grouping of knowledge, skills, and attitudes should reflect the combinations in which they will be applied after the change is complete. Collaboration with training designers and/or other learning specialists will help to identify how much time should be allowed for learners to gain competence in each learning module. It is a key principle of learning that it should be followed immediately by its application. This means that the learning activities should ideally be delivered just in time, immediately before the change is implemented and the learning will be used. If this is not practical, consider allowing for phased development of relevant knowledge, skills, and attitudes so that the last stage of the learning, or refresher session, occurs immediately before live use. This may increase learning costs, but, to adapt Peter Drucker's famous saying, if you think training is expensive, try ignorance. Note, this is practitioner only, but is included here for completeness. Defining what is to be learnt. Writing good learning objectives is a skill set in its own right. However, the heart of the matter is to be clear what the outcomes must be. For one learning activity, there are usually a number of specified learning objectives. Learning objectives should include all knowledge, skills, and attitudes, KSAs, relevant to the work. Outcome measures, or indicators, should relate well to the way the job will actually be done. Success standards set in a competence test may be different from those set as learning objectives. The level of detail must be appropriate, supplemented by other documents where necessary. Attitudinal objectives can be specified through consistent patterns of behavior. Finally, supervisors of the work activity should agree the list of learning objectives, confident that anyone who met those objectives will perform effectively in their role. Take a moment to consider the following. 1. What are your experiences of the learning dip? 2. How did this experience affect you or others? 3. What would have helped you through the dip? Models of individual change. This figure shows how personal performance, energy, and mood vary through the normal process of human change. Stages 1 and 2: shock and denial. After the initial shock of being confronted with a change, an individual, or group, often resists engaging with the change, as if trying to prove that the change is either unreal or unnecessary. This denial phase is characterized by a burst of additional defensive energy, which tends to increase temporarily both performance and mood. The shock element is minimized by effective and early communication. If at all possible, involve people in the planning process. Once change is announced, be aware of signs that people are not taking it fully seriously, balancing empathy with firmness of resolve. 3. Anger and blame. Assuming the change is real and will continue, there comes a point at which those experiencing the change can no longer avoid engaging with it. At this point, denial often gives way to anger or blame. The idea that it's not fair may take hold. The management, the market, the people in suits, always they are blamed for the change. This is a time for empathy, and for helping people to consider realistically the impact changes will have on them individually. Don't try to minimize the losses people will experience. They need to know that the cost of the change to them personally has been well understood. 4. Bargaining and self-blame. As mood and performance decline further, blame may turn towards self, and elements of bargaining emerge. In fear of bereavement, people try to do deals with God to preserve the life of their loved one. Faced with imminent redundancy, people may take on additional work to delay or avert the threat. 5. Depression and confusion. The process to this point has been characterized by a drive to hold on to, or to revert to, the existing or former situation. Energy, morale and performance may fluctuate, but all relate to the downswing side of the curve, between anger/blaming others and self-blame/bargaining. The realization that all such efforts are failing leaves people at their lowest point of performance, energy and morale. Confusion, sadness, even depression are characteristics of this period. Empathy, active listening, and good support structures are probably the most effective responses to this phase of change. 6 and 7. Acceptance and problem solving. For someone to come through this period requires a point of acceptance. It is a point at which the person accepts at a deep level that change is happening and resolves to address this in the future. For significant changes, a person may not reach this point quickly, and in some cases may not reach it at all, but no real future-oriented behavior will begin until there is true acceptance of what has changed. Leading and managing change. It is essential to remember that the change curve is a personal journey. Not all members of a peer group will experience change in the manner of synchronized swimmers. Different personalities, different life experiences, different personal circumstances at the time of the change, all these and more will affect the way that different individuals respond, and how quickly. These are some practical observations for leading and managing change. People sometimes get stuck in one stage, or oscillate between two, often around blame. The length and depth of the personal change curve can vary considerably, from a brief and minor wobble, fluctuation, to a major roller coaster lasting for months. The change curve is a function of time. Some apparent resistance simply reflects a difference between the position of those announcing a change and those receiving it. People are expressing their own process of adjustment. Don't take anger and blame personally. This pattern of human response to change remains true for the positive changes in life as well as for unwelcome ones. Some factors that tend to affect the length and depth of the personal change curve and the probability of emerging successfully on the upside include: how deeply an individual is affected by the change. Understanding the change from the perspectives of various stakeholders and stakeholder groups is therefore critical, so that the impact on each can be calibrated. The personal competence and resilience of the individual. The contribution of supervisors and local line managers is vital. They are best placed to assess how different people are likely to handle the level of change expected. The interaction between one change and another in the life of an individual. Someone who possesses a stable and strong network of friends and family may cope with redundancy better than another person who is currently undergoing a messy family breakup. Again, if supervisors and line managers know their people well, they can help to assess such impacts. How much control or influence people feel they have over the change. This is why involving people as early as possible, and as deeply as possible, improves the prospects for successful change. Note that this may go a long way towards explaining the relatively small disturbance that follows positive changes. In many cases, these are changes that we have initiated ourselves and feel more in control of. The second of our two models of individual change was developed in the early 1990s by William Bridges. In his book Managing Transitions, Bridges makes a key distinction between change and transition. Change, the actual events, activities and steps that can be put into a diary or project plan. Transition, the human, psychological process of letting go of one pattern and engaging with a new one. Letting go of the old ways and the old identity people had. This first phase of transition is an ending, and the time when you need to help people to deal with their losses. Going through an in-between time when the old is gone, but the new isn't fully operational. We call this time the neutral zone. It's when the critical psychological realignments and repatternings take place. Coming out of the transition and making a new beginning. This is when people develop the new identity, experience the new energy, and discover the new sense of purpose that make the change begin to work. It is clear from the discussion of the change curve that transition will be a personal process. People will vary as to how quickly they will be ready to let go of the past and truly engage with a new future. Bridges describes 3 phases, or processes, that have to be completed in order for personal transition to be successful. Bridges' stages of transition. The 3 phases are sequential but overlapping processes. Each phase needs attention at the right time to ensure that planned changes are actually implemented by people. Focus is on the creative potential of the neutral zone, not just as a time of confusion and depression, but as a time when there is sufficient fluidity for experimentation, a time when genuinely new attitudes and behaviors can be developed. Managing transition, advice to managers and leaders. Endings. The advice offered by Bridges to managers and leaders on how to help people through this process of letting go of the old ways and the old identity people had would include: describe the change in specific terms, so that people are clear what precisely will be different. Do not dismiss as trivial anything that people are losing. Acknowledge them as losses, large and small, with genuine empathy. Let people know what will not change. Identify the reasons why the current situation cannot continue. Don't confuse problems that people raise about the content of the change with those arising from people going through the change process. Problems raised about the content are valuable input and will improve the change. Show respect for all that has gone before. Help people to see how the best aspects of the past, its successes and, most importantly, its values, will be preserved and enhanced by the change. Communicate prodigiously. It is difficult to communicate too much. The neutral zone. Bridges coins the term neutral zone for the time when those affected have let go, or made substantial progress on letting go, of the way things were. He acknowledges that this in-between time is often difficult, strange, stressful and disorientating for those affected, but asserts that precisely for these reasons it opens the possibility of experimentation and for developing genuinely new patterns. Think of the neutral zone as a journey from one place to another. Here are some implications. The journey is inevitable. However, I can choose to see any journey as an unwelcome interruption to my life, to be kept as short as possible, or as an opportunity to look around, to learn, to see new things. Using an image such as this can help people to give meaning to this period. It can legitimize the opportunities that may occur if we look for them. During a journey, my normal routines are disrupted. In adapting myself to these new routines, I may learn better ways of managing myself when I am settled. In the same way, individuals and teams passing through their neutral zone need temporary solutions to the problems of transition. Some of these adaptations will prove to be useful innovations once the transition draws to a close. Notice these and celebrate them. A journey can be a lonely time. Encourage those in the neutral zone to connect more intentionally with other people and other teens. New beginnings. Making a new beginning is a risk time. It means committing to a new kind of future. Bridges recommends for things that encourage such commitment. He suggests that people need a purpose for the future after the change, which encourages people to focus on making it work. A picture that will engage the creative imagination of those affected, so that they can already touch and feel the positive situation after the change. A plan that is credible, and that gives people a clear route to success in implementing the change. A part to play, both in the execution of the plan and in the new world after the change is accomplished. Advising leaders and managers on change, Bridges suggests that making new beginnings into a reality requires consistency in behavior and messaging from all seen as influential in the situation after the change. This includes recognizing the importance of symbolic decisions. Visible early successes to encourage and reassure people, make these widely known. Celebration of key milestones on the change journey, especially at the journey's end. Take a moment to do this activity. 1. For a change you are familiar with, how well, if at all, is the change curve and transitions model used to support an individual through a major change? 2. What specific examples can you think of where either or both models were used and what were the results? End of module. In this module, we have looked at learning preferences, learning theory and the different way people learn. Learning new skills, the importance of conscious competence and the learning dip. Models of individual change, the change curve, leading and managing change and transition. In the next module, we will be looking at motivation and individual drivers.